Good morning. Good morning again.
Hello. Here, you can.
Hello. All right. This is a very special morning. We are.
Here. You can talk into the altar if you want.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Okay.
Good morning. This is a very special morning. We have our own, very own Sarah Elizabeth McCandless, who's going to share with us her experience in the Houston bubble. This is also an extra special morning because I see one of my San Marino High School classmates, class of 66, Skip Healy, Tricia's husband. Welcome, Skip. It's a Chip. Yes, Chip. Sorry, Chip. Chip. Yes, all right. Well, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, you have gathered us in community to seek to better know you and serve you. Open our eyes, our ears, our minds, and our hearts to a closer look at the vastness of your mystery. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. I don't think Sarah Elizabeth needs an introduction.
Can you guys hear me okay? All the way in the back? Great. Well, welcome. I know a lot of people have asked me about this and are really excited about this, so I hope it lives up to your expectations. I put all this together and I practiced it yesterday and it went 48 minutes. So I'm going... Got it. I will stand over here. So it ran 48 minutes yesterday, so I'm going to try and speed through some parts faster today so there are enough time for questions. There were a number of places yesterday when I was going through it where it felt like, oh, this could be a forum, this could be a forum, this could be a forum. Jeff could do a forum about this, Tim could do a forum about that. So there are lots of things, and hopefully it will spawn conversations into the future, but we'll go ahead and get started. So what was I actually doing? I was a human test subject. I was a human guinea pig, and it was a blast. So Hera, people have called it like the Mars simulation, the Houston bubble. My grandmother called it going into the cage. So I've heard all sorts of versions of what I was actually doing. It is officially called HERA, which stands for the Human Exploration Research Analog. And so what that means is that I'm living in a 650 square foot habitat, and that's serving as an analog or a simulated, home to help us understand how isolation, confinement, and remote conditions impact humans when you're going, to really far-flung places. So yes, I would love to be an astronaut. No, I did not actually go to Mars. So I'll say that up front. Because I'm an engineer and I'm a numbers person, 650 square feet with 4 people for 45 days. So those are the numbers, big numbers to take away. We had no connectivity to the outside world, so no internet, no phones, anything like that. We had no refrigeration. I'll talk more about that later. And we had no time outside. So no sunshine, no trees. We had pictures of those things, but you didn't actually get to go outside. As a quick backstory, you're not really allowed to be on any sort of long-term medication to be eligible for HERA. You need to generally be a healthy person. And the only medication that you take in HERA are vitamin D supplements because no sunshine. So this is what it looks like. This was my home for 45 days. I said that it was 650 square feet, but even that maybe is a little hard to wrap your head around. So my friend Google Earth helped me figure out that this hall, Cleaver Hall right here, is about 59 feet wide, 112 feet long, so roughly 6,600 square feet, this building right here. I was living in something a tenth the size of that. So imagine 10 habitats shoved in here, and that's what I was living in for 45 days. And on top of that, they put extra things in there to make it even more cramped for you, to make it even more uncomfortable. I have a bunch of pictures later of all of the inside of Hera, but just to kind of help orient you before we get into the inside, this is sort of the main module right here. Because I'm from Kansas, we'll call it a grain silo. So sort of your vertical grain silo right here. This is the airlock, so it's a little kind of halvesy horizontal cylinder, and then the hygiene module over here on the other side. So this is a really wordy chart, and after this it's basically all pictures, I promise. So what are you doing when you're inside Hera for those 45 days? The short answer is a lot of different things. There are 18 different, the official language I get to say is 18 different human and health performance studies. So that's essentially 18 different scientific studies that are working together to help identify risks to humans when they're living in these extreme conditions, when you're living in isolation, when you're living in confinement, when you're living in these really remote conditions. And I've had a handful of people ask me, well, we already have humans in space. Like, why do we still need to study this? How is what you're doing different from humans that are already on board the International Space Station right now? And it's a good question because we've had humans in space for long periods of time, for over 20 years now. One of the big things that scientists believe is a big difference for long duration missions, going to the moon, going to Mars, things like that, and especially when you go out to Mars, is that you can no longer see the Earth. And there's a psychological difference traveling in space and being in a remote environment when you know that you can't just pull the ripcord and come back to the surface of the Earth in 90 minutes. So if something on the ISS goes really wrong, the astronauts can get back down to the surface of the Earth. There are lots of protocols in place to do that. If something goes wrong out in deep space on your way to the moon, you can't just pull a ripcord and come home safely. We've all hopefully are familiar with this story of Apollo 13, right? That wasn't an easy problem to fix, and that was not an easy solution to come up with to save those astronauts. So there's a psychological difference knowing that when you're going to these places, you can't just come home if something goes wrong. So how do you deal with that remoteness? How do you deal with that, really small confinement? And I showed in the previous chart, we're living in 650 square feet. The ISS is a lot bigger than that. You can roam, you can throw things around, and so we're talking about really small volumes when you're going to these places that are much farther away. So all of these research studies are designed to help identify what those risk factors might be. And then once you've identified what those factors are, how can you combat those? What can you do to make the astronauts safer? What can you do to help them stay sane? How can you make their time in space more effective? So that's what the research studies are designed to do. Now, each study is independent, but they work synergistically together to try and help those things. So like one of the things that might help is getting some good exercise so that your physical body is healthy, but there are also things that you can do in terms of mindfulness practices to help, make sure that your brain is healthy and that your, mental well-being is what it should be in these remote conditions. So all these different things are working together, or that's the goal. In addition to that, this is a distinction that matters for the scientists and for Hera in particular. For your general layperson, it doesn't matter as much. But in addition to all of these science studies that we're doing, we're also doing things that are referred to as operational tasks or training tasks. And these were actually some of my favorite things because these are very much modeled on actual ISS jobs. So the ISS, again, the International Space Station, what the real astronauts are living in right now today. So we were practicing and doing a lot of things that are very similar to what the real astronauts get to do right now. And that for me was super cool. So you're practicing flight simulations, you're practicing emergency response. You had to take a lot of surveys. Survey fatigue is a real thing, I learned. You have to do system checks, maintenance checks, you have to clean your habitat. So some things that are fun, some things that are a little more mundane. So you're actually very busy. And so on top of all of this stuff, you get to exercise. Of course, you sleep, you eat, and you have some downtime as well. So you're actually pretty busy. Okay, so now it's all the pictures. So this, I'm just going to kind of fly through so I have enough time for questions later. So this is building a little robot using augmented reality, taking care of some shrimp. We had some life science experiments. This was a fun activity here. This was called Virtual Reality Operations on Mars, VROOM. This was actually an operational task. But the idea is that we're simulating a walk on the surface of Mars. And so two of our crewmates, the two over there, you see they're wearing these virtual reality headsets. And so they put them on, and it looks like they're walking on the surface of Mars. And then the other two crewmates, we are drone pilots, and so we are flying these drones using, software and simulations, and then we get to tell our other crewmates where to go. So we see them walking on the surface. They're going around to do geology experiments, to impact or to assess, our habitat, to look at our solar panel power, that sort of stuff. Because we don't actually get to leave the habitat, this was us simulating what we would do if we were actually on the surface of Mars. And it was one of my favorite things to do because all four of us got to work together. A lot of the other things we do, you sort of do independently because they want to collect data on each individual. And so this was fun because we all got to work together. We checked for bacteria in the habitat, so that was fun, also a little gross. You can tell this is a posed photo. I did not wear earrings for 45 days in the habitat, nor did I wear my flight suit for 45 days in the habitat. But we had this geology box, and so after I guess I didn't say this at the beginning, but for those 45 days that we are on Mars, you fly to Mars for 20 days, you're on the surface for 4, and then you fly home. So you're not on the surface of Mars very long, which is a little bit of a bummer. But it's actually, if you think about the proportions, the 4 days out of 45, it's probably roughly right for a crewed mission to Mars. It takes anywhere from 6 months to a year to get to Mars. So if you're thinking about sending humans there, you could take a year to get there. You're doing whatever it is you're doing on Mars, maybe for 6 months, and then depending on how the planets are aligned on the back end, it could take you another year, maybe even longer, to get back to Mars on the back end, or get back to Earth on the back end. So this is to do geology assessments after we had gone to the surface of Mars, which we were able to do. And then we also grew plants. We did not get to eat them, so it was cruel and unusual punishment. And so we were growing lettuce hydroponically. And so because we had livestock and because we had crops, we decided that we were space farmers as well. Okay, so now this is getting more into, so the pictures I just showed you, most of those fell more into the category of those operational tasks that I was talking about. This is where we get more into the science. So we had lots of different brain scans, and so we wore assorted headgear. This one was my favorite because this was a brain scan where you got to close your eyes and just sit there and do nothing. These ones you had to put the headsets on and then actually do different cognitive tests. So this one you got to relax, this one you had to work. We had a resting metabolic rate test, and so that's essentially to figure out how your metabolism is changing over time in the habitat. You have a resting metabolic rate test before you even go inside to figure out how much food you need during the mission, and then we monitor that throughout the mission as well to see if that changes or not. And then this is another one. Hopefully no one's offended by the lack of shirt. But here, this was a test to look at a lot of different physiological data about each of us. So what is your heart rate? What is your EEG? What is your blood pressure? All of that stuff in different configurations. So if you're sitting, if you're standing, if you're sitting after you've stood. And so that matters because in a small environment, especially for long duration, you might be confined to a single position for a long period of time. And so this is trying to figure out, how those metrics change for different positions and how healthy or not healthy those different positions might be. And so you can see, sorry, since I'm a talker and a mover, you can see right here, this is a finger blood pressure. I was actually wearing this as well. So if this wasn't enough, you had more stuff that you got to hold and carry and help measure you. Okay. This is a cutaway of the habitat. I'm about to show some pictures of the inside, and this is just to kind of help, again, provide some context and orientation. So this is actually kind of cutting it off and looking at it from the back side. So again, the hygiene module, L1 right here, L2 and L3 in the main module, and then the airlock over there. So this is the main module here. You can see like their desks, they're these empty. This is what I was talking about when I said they put extra things in there just to take up space. That's what a lot of these boxes were. There's nothing in them. They're just there to be annoying. So that's why obviously in a real space mission there would be things in them. But so they're just shoving a bunch of stuff in there. So you have kind of this central core, that's where the elevator is, and then different desks and experiments and things all set up around them. Above the front door of the habitat on the first level, there are these different stickers, which are really cool because they're the different mission patches for all the missions that have participated in HERA. And so this is ours, and I'll talk about it in more detail later. And you didn't realize you got a gift today. I have stickers of our mission patch if anybody wants one, so make sure you grab one on your way out. I'll keep moving. So this is the airlock. This is how I talked to people. We had at JPL we call it a VOCA, but basically you had to put on a headset, tune into one of these frequencies, and then push down a button to send messages out, and then you would hear messages back. So a little old school. This is the only door in the habitat. So when we wanted to have privacy for our family conferences, to talk to the medical doctor or to talk to the psychologist, we were in the airlock and we could close the door. This is the hygiene module. Normally I wouldn't include pictures of a bathroom, but enough people have asked questions, not just here, but more broadly, enough people have asked questions about how that works that I thought I would show it just to talk about it. So just a regular sink. The short version is that it was a regular bathroom. There are a lot of things that they simulated, and I think they did a very good job making this a very authentic experience, but we still had regular human gravity, we had regular air, and regular bathroom. So a sink, a toilet you see back there. The only thing that was tricky for me in particular was the shower, because I'm relatively tall, and you see that the shower head isn't. Even if you stick it in the notch above, I still have to kind of like bend over backwards to try to shower. And not only that, the way the shower head sort of sat in the holder, it always seemed to be pointed into the corner. No matter how much you tried to not do that, it always twisted into the corner. And because the module is round, it is rounded in the shower too, so you're sort of, doing this kind of thing, and that was kind of a challenge. And if you knocked it off, which I did all the time, you then ran the risk of the shower head coming out of the shower curtain and spraying the rest of the module, which normally wouldn't be that big a deal, but that's where we hung all of our clothes. So if you were trying to dry your clothes and then you have a galump like me come in and take a shower, I'm spraying stuff all over the place because I'm too tall. So that was funny. L2 and L3, so again, this is that same central elevator that's, going up the grain silo, if you will. We had sort of exercise stuff on one side, and then on the other side, we had this desk area, so that's where we did a lot of work together, but also where we relaxed, where we ate meals. You see we have these two monitors here and here. Those monitors were what we could use to watch movies on if we wanted to entertain ourselves that way as a crew. And then these monitors here are actually our windows to the outside. And so you'll see what that means in a second. And then on our third level, there were ladders. You can kind of see a ladder over there on the far right side. We had ladders that went up to technically what we called the third level, and these were our bunks. And so we're all on this kind of connected platform. And so I was a little apprehensive about the sleeping situation, because if one person rolls over and, rotates the platform, everybody feels it. If one person snores, everybody hears it. You'll notice no walls, no any sort of partitions to, separate bunk from bunk. Fortunately, none of us snored, so all of my fears about the sleeping arrangement never amounted to anything, so that was great. We all got to decorate our bunks. For those who have eagle eyes, you may notice a Jayhawk in that bunk. That one was mine. There are more pictures of that close up in a minute. This was our kitchen. It was a microwave, essentially. So I already said there was no refrigerator, there's no freezer. So all of the food, and then of course, no fresh food. So all of the food that we had to eat, or that we got to eat, was shelf stable. So that could be granola bars, nuts, dried fruit, things like that, or dehydrated food. Anyone who's ever been on a camping trip who's taken dehydrated food, you stick boiling water in, you wait 12 minutes, and you get spaghetti on the other side. We had a lot of that as well. So, and then this is just kind of an interior of the stowage bin that maybe isn't that interesting. I thought it was kind of fun. But we have these bins all over the place, and I think most of what we had to pack for this experience was food. You can't resupply partway through. Once you launch and leave the earth, you have what you have, and that is it. So all the food that 4 people need for 45 days had to be put in the habitat when we left. so you have lots of these bins. And the fun fact, too, actually, is that a lot of these bins actually were repurposed from the space shuttle era. So there was actually a lot of stuff in the habitat that actually had gone to space on previous missions, which I thought was super cool. So fine dining, you can see here we have a lot of things that are brown that we get to eat. So we had spaghetti. I'm not sure what that is. Probably some sort of packaged tuna. I'm never eating packaged tuna ever again. And then that's like a fruit pouch. I think it was like one with chia seeds or something like that. So we actually had a lot more fruit than I expected we would, because we had, fruit cups, we had applesauce, we had these fruit pouches. There are little smoothie pouches even. I didn't know that. People with kids probably knew that, but I didn't know that. So that was a fun discovery to get more fruit than I thought. Food fatigue is real. I learned that too. So the way the food works is that we had a menu that they plan out for 11 days, and then you cycle through that same menu 4 times to get to 44 days, and then you do the first day a 5th time to get you to 45 days. So the first time through, it's maybe new, it's exciting, you figure out what you like, you figure out what you don't like. The second time through, you don't remember what you don't like, but then you remember again very vividly. And then you get to the 3rd time through and you're dreading it days ahead of time. And then you get to the 4th time through and you get to the day that you don't like and you're like, yes, the last day of the tuna, I don't have to eat this ever again. So there's definitely a whole emotional roller coaster related to the food. And we got to the point where we would sort of mix stuff up and kind of try to make it more interesting. They have a lot of condiments on board to try to make it more interesting. I don't eat hot sauce because I'm pathetic, and so that worked for a lot of other people. They would add hot sauce to lots of different things to make the food more interesting. I didn't do that. I added some salsa a couple times, but that was how the food worked out. And then it was funny, the day we came out, we didn't have any potatoes in Mission, which we all thought was weird, especially for anyone who's read the book The Martian or seen the movie The Martian. The main character in that grows potatoes, for anyone who's not familiar, and he eats potatoes for like a year. And we had no potatoes, and we didn't realize that until about halfway through that we hadn't been eating potatoes. And so then we started, I won't say fantasizing about potatoes, but dreaming about them maybe. Like mashed potatoes, like a loaded baked potato, like French fries. Like we didn't even have potato chips. We had like cauliflower chips, which was super lame. And so we're imagining all these different ways we can eat potatoes, and then the day we get out, we go to a steakhouse for dinner so that we can all get potatoes. And my family thought it was hilarious that we were all together for 45 days, and then we have freedom, and what do? We go eat together. But that tells you that it was a great group of people, and we all were very close with each other. So the exercise, I was a little nervous about the exercise as well, because I'm pretty active out here. I run, I hike, play tennis, all sorts of stuff, and I just walk around a lot as well, just in daily life, probably like a lot of you. And so we rode a bike 3 times a week. I'm not a bike rider, so that was also an emotional journey. We lifted weights 3 times a week or did some sort of strength training. You didn't have to lift the weights if you didn't want to. And then this is a crewmate and I. We found matching shirts, and so we took that photo for NASA Public Affairs Office. But in any event, the bike riding was actually a lot more effective than I thought it would be. I thought we did a test before we went in where they figure out not exactly what your max heart rate is, but it's called a VO2 max. I don't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's essentially how effectively your body uses oxygen. And so people who are very healthy, like professional athletes, for example, have a really, really high VO2 max. And so they can work out harder than the average person without their heart exploding, basically. And so we do this test before we go in to figure out how much of a workout is too much for us, so that, what I thought then was going to happen is we'd go into the habitat, we'd ride the bike, and they're watching you 24/7, by the way. I don't think I said that. So they're watching you all the time for your safety. So they're watching you, and so I thought they would see us on the bike, and they'd see me going too hard, or they'd get like some sort of live stream of the day, and they'd be like, Sarah Elizabeth, you're riding the bike too hard, you have to slow down. And I was a little nervous about that because I wanted to be able to have some sort of exercise outlet. And fortunately, that's not at all how it happened. You could ride the bike as hard or as easily as you wanted to for the whole mission. So that was great for all of us. So we took our 30-minute bike workouts pretty seriously. This is the elevator, just the obligatory picture of all of us looking down the elevator. This is mostly to show you that there's storage in the elevator as well. So you see all the way around here, all this empty space now, that was all filled with food when we left. Why are there 6 people? Great question. So 4 of us go in, but they select 6 people so that if something happens to one of the primary crew members in training, they have a backup ready to slot in. So all 6 of us go through the 3 weeks of training together. 4 of us go into the habitat, and then the other 2 backups are released and go home. Making the habitat feel like home. Now you can see all of my fandoms, pictures of my family, that sort of stuff. A picture of my desk. So that was fun. You get to hide stickers around the habitat. Every crew has done that. So this is me hiding a sticker on the underside of the table. And then these were actually all gifts from our backups. They gave us a puzzle, they wrote us a card, and long story that I won't get into. We decided our mascot was an armadillo, so we had a stuffed armadillo that we took with us as well. Oh, and not only are they decorations, they can also be clothes. This is where the habitat actually was at the Space Center. It's in this hangar, essentially kind of on the northern side of Johnson Space Center. And the door opens, not frequently, but if there's a fire alarm and you have to evacuate, they open the door. Something that was funny for me about Johnson Space Center in general is that it's really close to Pasadena, Texas, where JPL is close to Pasadena, California. And so I found some fun Pasadena city limit signs and took pictures there too. Okay, we're getting close. Okay, oh, whoops, I went one too far. So this is our mission patch that we all designed and came up with ourselves. So the 6 names of all of the crew around the outside. And then the secret behind the patch, since you may be taking one home with you, is that there are 6 stars on here. Well, obviously, a lander on the surface of Mars. We're going to Mars. And then we had 6 stars. At surface level, 6 stars, 6 crew members. But if you imagine this star up here, initially that was how we designed it, and then the printer said they had to kind of jigger it around a little bit. These 6 stars are supposed to mimic this constellation over here. Does anybody know what that constellation is? Anyone? It's Taurus. It was not really an easy question. So it's the constellation Taurus. And it's that constellation because during our mission from August 9th when we went in to September 23rd when we came out, if you were on the Earth looking for Mars in the sky, it was in this constellation. That's where it was. So we were sort of in Taurus from the Earth, and that's what the stars are. The motto here, Mars is calling and we must go. A version of one of the mottos at JPL, which is the stars are calling and we must go, which is originally inspired by a very famous John Muir quote, the mountains are calling and we must go, for anyone who's familiar with that quote. And then these are all of our official headshots. So Aaron, primary crew member, Sergey, primary crew member, Brandon, primary crew member, myself, Jason and Anderson, these were our 2 backups. Okay, whoops, one too far. And we were all really good friends. We ate together, went to an ISS experience together. After a mission, because we hadn't spent enough time together, I convinced our remaining crew members to go to the Pasadena Rodeo, which was really fun because California doesn't have one. So we went to the Pasadena, Texas Rodeo. The 3 of them basically had never been to a rodeo before. I've been to a lot. I participated in rodeos, so it was fun to introduce them to something else. Packing for Mars. So this was all that I took. I took clothes, toiletries. You'll see that like a third of this probably are letters and things that people gifted me or wanted to send with me. And so I was overwhelmed. We'll have, okay, good, I still have time. I'll talk more about that in a second. But this is what I took. It fits into a duffel bag. And this is where it was stored in the habitat.
Hello, this is the end of our mission, and I'm getting ready to unpack, so I just want to show our stowage situation. So you see we have our stowage bins up here. And we think, oh my gosh, those bins and airplanes are annoying. These actually are in that bag, so we don't have to use them all that often. So we have our stowage bin up here, and bring it out. And then you see all of my belongings for 45 days on Mars are all packed up in here. And that was it.
That's it.
All you need to go to Mars safely. Thanks.
So that's all the stuff. Oh yeah, my camping bag. So now the part that is I've been more excited to talk about specifically with this audience. This was one of the points yesterday when I was running through it, and I realized I called it spirituality in the Hab. I think we could probably have a whole forum about like spirituality versus faith versus religion. Like, what do those words mean to different people, and how do they, represent different things? This is just, what I chose to call it. So I think everyone knows that this community was fantastic and fabulous, and so I took some consecrated hosts with me. So I was actually going through, a service on my own every Sunday that I was in the Habitat. And so I would do communion. The first week I think I just did the communion, and then the week after that I just started doing essentially a full service. And so I got to choose a collect every week, which for me was kind of fun. I realized you guys, a lot of you probably know this, but I didn't remember that there are collects actually already marked out for every week. And so on any given week, I got to decide, do I want to use that collect? Is there a holiday version of a collect? So like on Labor Day, there's actually a Labor Day collect. Is there another version like specifically for education or for exploration or something like that? So I got to choose my own collect every week, so that was fun. And then, of course, there are different versions of the Eucharistic prayer. I don't remember, I'm sure Tim could tell us, that you're probably supposed to use one version at one point of time in the calendar. I didn't adhere to that. Eucharistic prayer C is the one that talks about like the universe and the stars and the planets and the coordinates. I did use that one. So I use Eucharistic prayer C a lot. I grew up with prayer A. That's, I think, like the more kind of traditional one. And like I never got homesick or anything like that, but if I felt that I wanted something more of like a touchstone to out here or to how I grew up, I would do A. So I kind of hopped back and forth. And so that's just a picture of me in the Habitat doing communion one Sunday. And so you'll see that when we were relaxing, we were actually in these camp chairs. So that was kind of fun. I don't think I've spent that much time in a camp chair ever, but they're actually very comfortable. And so I'll let this play first. Let's see if it goes.
Hello, Church of Our Saviour friends. This is Sarah Elizabeth. I'm sending a message to you all the way from Mars. It is Mission Day 21. We're almost halfway through our mission. We're on the surface of Mars right now. And I just wanted to send a quick message to say hello and to say thank you for all of your fabulous letters and words of encouragement. I have been opening them throughout the whole mission. I opened the package of letters from the kiddos this morning, or yesterday morning actually, and it was great. I have some pictures and some videos. I can't send them yet, they have to be approved first, but we are able to send some audio messages, so hopefully this makes its way to you. But I just wanted to say thank you all for all your support, all your prayer. I feel loved and blessed even though I'm far, far away, and I look forward to seeing all of you when I get back, so sending love and blessings and prayers all the way to you from Mars. Take care until I see you again.
So the hope was that would get to you while I was in mission, and that didn't quite happen. But no, I was thinking of you anyway while I was on Mars in mission and was very grateful. And I forgot to mention this. This is I don't know how well you guys can see this, but this is a note card of the Chapel of the Transfiguration, which is an Episcopalian chapel in Grand Tetons National Park. So I don't know who all's been there. I was going to ask Jeff, but I think he's gone off to get ready for the 10 o'clock. So it's a beautiful chapel. Behind the altar is this big glass window so you can see the mountains, and it's fabulous. I know we have a fabulous book and fabulous note cards of our stained glass windows. I would love a pen and ink drawing of Church of Our Saviour, and then I could add it to this collection. So for anyone who's artistically inclined. Okay, so kind of moving forward, I don't know, is Reese here? I don't see him. Okay, well I asked him ahead of time if I could specifically call him out, and he said it was okay. So Reese sent me a copy of this book to take in with me into the Habitat. I have it right here. If you haven't read it or aren't familiar with it, it's fantastic. It's called Praying the Dark Hours, written by Jim Cotter. It's actually a combination of two books that had been published before and I guess hadn't reached a bigger market, so then they combined them and republished it as this, Praying the Dark Hours. And so there's sort of two parts. There's a short reading for every day of the year, and then there's kind of a longer nightly prayer routine for every day of the week. And so there's a reading, there's a psalm, there's a song, so for each night of the week. And so one of the prayers, I don't remember if it was one of the nights or if it's something that was in all of the nights, but one of the prayers that really spoke to me while I was in mission is this one that is written here, which says, "Inspire me while waking, restore me while sleeping, that awake in the night I may watch with Christ, and to sleep may rest in your peace." And so this was really meaningful for me because one of the things, especially at the beginning of the mission, I don't know if anyone, who all here knows this, but I was actually in a car accident a week before I left and my car was totaled. I was on my way to Church of Our Saviour actually, and I got T-boned. And so throughout the training part of the mission, I'm dealing with insurance companies, with lawyers, trying to get all of that straightened out. And I keep reminding them, look, in a week, like, you won't be able to reach me. And so I get into the habitat. We're doing all of these things, during the day. And then 11 o'clock, the lights go out, you sit in bed, and your brain races. And of course, this happens when we're out here in the real world, but it was extra magnified in the habitat. And so I'm sitting there in bed going, oh my gosh, what's happening with all of these things? What's happening at work? Do they need me? What's happening with the insurance company? Do they have what they need to move forward? What's happening with the lawyers? Am I going to get sued? All of these like terrible thoughts that I don't need when I'm already in this situation. And so this was a really, kind of powerful prayer for me to sort of help center and kind of help turn off all of that noise and help turn off all of that buzz and to kind of help me recenter and be in the moment and, remember, turn to God in those moments to help me kind of get through those moments before I would go to sleep. And then one of the readings in particular, there was a 36-hour sleep deprivation study that we did near the end of the mission. So you woke up at 7 o'clock on Friday, you're awake all day Friday, Friday night, all day Saturday, and then you go to bed at 7 o'clock Saturday night. I pulled one all-nighter in college, and that was 2 years ago, and I'm kidding, it was longer ago than that, but it was a little bit ago, and I'm generally not an all-nighter kind of gal. And so it was funny because the invocation for Friday during the sleep deprivation study was especially perfect. It says, "The angels of God guard us through the night and quiet the powers of darkness. The Spirit of God be our guide and lead us to peace and glory." Great. "Jesus said to his disciples, 'Were you not able to stay awake for 1 hour? Keep watch, all of you, and pray that you will not fail in time of testing.'" And so it was too perfect, and I shared that with the crew, and we all laughed. Like, we just couldn't believe that it, coincided so well. And I think one of the things that sort of amazed me, because every time I went through, because I would do the Monday routine on all the different Mondays, and each time I went through it, something different would come out, and something different, would speak to me for that given night, for that given week. And so it was amazing to me how with the book, or with this book, going through a book of common prayer, opening a letter from someone, it always said exactly what I needed to hear without being some sort of generic platitude. So I don't know how you all did that and wrote such meaningful things, but it was always something that I needed to hear or be reminded of in that moment. And so that was really cool. Okay, great. It's 9:41. A couple prayer things that were interesting to me. Obviously, everyone's familiar with the Lord's Prayer.
Question or two?
I've got like 4 more slides. I've got like 4 more slides, and then we'll have lots of questions if that's okay. So Lord's Prayer, everyone's familiar with it. The first time I said it into the habitat, something very obvious about it jumped out to me that I'd never noticed before. I wasn't on the earth anymore. And so when I was saying it, that first time I got to "on earth as it is in heaven," and my brain paused and said, you're not on the earth anymore. And so I started saying it this way instead. So be with us in this universe, wherever you may be, and that could be another forum, talking about like the universe, the multiverse, earth, heaven, how does that all, combine? So I started saying it this way. I've always said it this way: leave us not in temptation, as opposed to lead us not into temptation. If you went to this day, the silence retreat that was back in October, this was actually a point of discussion. That was very interesting, so I won't get into that right now. But that was a prayer tweak that stuck out to me. And then kind of related to this one, this is a post-communion prayer as well. And so again here, send us out into the world. And depending on how you interpret what the word world means, it might still be meaningful for you, in space or on Mars. To me, universe was more meaningful for what I was doing, so I did that one. And then the overview effect. So this is something that's really cool. Real astronauts experience this. And so the idea, Frank White, who's a space philosopher, coined the term. And so the idea is that when astronauts have gone into space, they see the world from a very different perspective. And they see the world as one unified whole. You don't see any boundaries. You don't see any borders. And so there's this cognitive shift in their brain that is happening. Like scientists and psychologists have studied this. And so there's actually a shift in your thinking and in your brain and how you view the world, how you view humanity, how you view your responsibility to help protect those things. And so it was interesting to me. I was familiar with this, but I didn't expect to experience that because even though we're simulating this mission, I'm not actually going to Mars. I'm not actually leaving Earth. And so it was amazing to me in the habitat, specifically from a prayer lens, I guess, that I did feel like I experienced this. Because one of the things that we were talking about in training and then in mission is that all of the work that you are doing in Hera, all of these studies you're participating in, all of the measurements that you're trying to collect, all of the things that you're trying to develop to keep people safe, it's not just to keep Americans safe. It's not just to keep Californians safe. It's to keep every astronaut who is going to go out there safer than they could be today. And so you're really part of something that's bigger than yourself. You're part of something that's helping all of humanity, not just a subset. Yes, this is at NASA. Yes, this is an American study, but it's not just for us. It's for everybody who is going to go out there. And so that was really cool, and that was sort of a little bit of a shift in my brain that I didn't expect. And then from a prayer lens, a lot of you are probably better at this than I am, but I tend, when I pray, to what I guess call kind of like inside out. You know, I start with pray for the people I know, the people who are closest to me. Pray for my community right here. Pray for the nation. Pray for the world. And so sometimes I have to remind myself to keep going through all of those rings to get all the way to pray for the world. And so when we were doing this, or when I was participating in this, it was amazing to me how quickly I didn't have to remind myself to do that anymore. It just became so much more natural just to go all the way out, or even start, pray for the world and then work your way back. So that was an interesting shift that I didn't expect. And then this was a really fun quote, and this reminded me, I know Marilyn's not here, she's on a silent retreat this week, or this weekend, I guess. But this is a great John Muir quote as well. When we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. And so this reminded me of a sermon that she gave shortly before I left that talked about the luminous web. I don't know if anyone remembers this sermon. It was in the summer in July. And talking about the luminous web and how everything is connected. And both Jeff and Tim have talked about the same thing as well. And so just this in particular, just talking about, everything being hitched, everything being connected to everything else, also spoke to me, and just the concept, that even though I'm on Mars, I'm still connected to you. I'm still connected to God. I'm still connected to my family. Yes, you're in a different place, but you still have all of these really meaningful connections to different communities. And so last but not least, thank you. I was going to open with this, and then I thought I'd leave it at the end for questions. So other than my prayer book over here, all of these things were gifts. Reese sent me this book. He also sent me some holy dirt and holy oil. I used that when I cracked my head on the habitat. Marilyn sent me this rosary. And then I don't even think this is all of the letters that people from this community sent, but this is hopefully most of them. Over a third of all the letters that I got were from you guys. And so it exceeded any expectations I had. I think I mentioned it in passing, thinking I'll get a couple, and that is great. A couple letters would be great. And then it was this outpouring. It was funny. The front desk lady in Houston, every time I would come in, she'd like, Sarah Elizabeth, I got more stuff for you today. And at one point she had to give me a bag because a bunch I think just came in all at one time. This is my last video, and then I'll have questions, or we can do questions.
First, we're here. We made it all in one piece. It is mission day 20, and we're here for the next several days. We don't get to stay very long, so we have lots of activities. Science, PK, watching on the surface. But I promised you guys that I would wait until I got to Mars to open all of your letters. And this is just my proof. Look, unopened, still sealed. I've been waiting to open this on Mars, and now that we're here, I'm going to open this later today. I'm super excited and super grateful, and I will report back once I've read all of your excellent letters and all of your excellent drawings. So thank you so much.
So now we have questions.
Wonderful. Yes, got a couple quickies, and then we'll quickly go around time. So, number one, what was the diameter of the module?
I don't remember off the top of my head. I can tell you. Probably like 15 feet, maybe.
Okay, it's 5 steps. Okay, and how did you get chosen? Why you? There must have been others that wanted it.
I tricked them, I guess. I didn't show my crazy in the interviews. You had to submit a resume, and then they review your resume to make sure you sort of meet, I think, kind of the minimum sort of like technical background steps. And then you have to be healthy, so went through some blood work, vision tests, all of that. You go for an interview to Houston to meet with a psychologist for 4 hours. That was actually really fun. I'm not being sarcastic. And then it goes from there.
Fire away.
Yes, Sarah. Thank you. This has been wonderful. I wondered what sort of preparations were available to you if there were a medical emergency, and also how did people handle their anxiety and or depression?
So from the medical perspective, before we go in, we have a medical kit. So there was a medical science station. It was the one that had all those white drawers, if you remember that, above the table. And so there was a first aid kit in there. We had medicines. We actually had like emergency stitches in case you like gashed your arm open somehow. So we were familiar with all the things that were in there. I didn't talk about this. We had a communication delay. And so when we were talking with folks on the ground, it got all the way up to 5 minutes. In the event of an emergency, that protocol would be disbanded, and we would treat it in real time. Fortunately, that didn't happen. And so we had talked about it. So the hope was that if there was a medical emergency, you could treat it first. If you couldn't, the ground would get involved. And then the second part, dealing with anxiety, depression, it's different for every person. One of the things that I didn't talk about, I'm not a big journaler. I wish I was, but I'm not. I know a lot of people who are, and of course there's lots of research that journaling is very good for you, especially to deal with those kinds of emotions. I'm an introvert by nature. I'm an outgoing introvert, so I confuse people. But I'm an introvert by nature, and so, especially I guess if you ask my family, an argument could be made that I don't handle my emotions all that well. Like I bottle them down until they like explode. So like that happened with my sister when I was little. Like she would do something that would annoy me. I wouldn't talk about it for 2 weeks, and then I'd break down in tears, and no one knew why. I'd like to think I've advanced past that point now as an adult. But I journaled a lot. And so it started out because I knew I wanted to document what was happening because I wouldn't remember all the details later. But it ended up becoming something very meaningful for that. I wouldn't say that I was ever depressed or anxious. I was just so excited to be there and be doing everything we were doing. But when I was frustrated about something, journaling actually was a really big help. And I can talk about that in more detail another time too.
So you've been on the trip. Do you really want to go to Mars and stay there on a mission?
I do. My family said they were very glad that this was just a simulation because they're afraid that if I was actually picked to go to Mars, I would never come back.
Yes. 1 year trip, right? 1 year trip up.
So it depends how the planets are aligned. I've worked on missions that have had like a 7-month transit time. We've had ones that are 11 months, so it depends. So it can be, say, a year there, and that's when they're at their closest, and they're only at their closest every 2 years. So it can be very long to go there, stay, and come back.
I love this so much, and I love you. The integration of science and theology, I don't know why this. Integration of science and theology is the whole reason I became a priest. I also have Desjardins' Book of Hours, which would have been great too. I am curious about you doing the regular prayer and how others on the in the module, if they were, had belief in God or whatever.
Yeah, so for those who maybe couldn't hear, kind of talking about like regular daily prayer routine and how other in the had maybe perceived that, or if they had any sort of faith background of their own. So I'll start with that. One of the crew members was a lapsed Catholic, their words, not mine. And it was funny because Reese sent me a number of things that were on stationery from when he was the rector at St. Paul's. And so this crew member actually noticed the stationery and said, like, is that, like, is that like Episcopalian stationery? And I was like, well, like it's from a person who was a priest and then you retired and you couldn't stay there. And so, you know, because like when you retire as a priest, you go to a different parish. And the crew member laughed and said, wait a minute, I thought Episcopalians were supposed to be like the chill ones. And so that was funny. So the lapsed Catholic, so came from a background but not, you know, practicing. And then there was another crew member who didn't grow up necessarily with a strong faith background, but it had become important to him for different reasons. I'm trying to, well, I guess I already gave it a little bit. I'm trying to not, you know, like out anybody in particular, but it became important to him for specific reasons as an adult. And so we actually had a number of really interesting conversations about faith and spirituality. And I wasn't nervous that anybody would be weird about me like wanting to do communion or pray in the habitat. Like we had talked about it, they like knew that I would do that going in. But you never know, I guess. Like some people who haven't had a good experience with religion may be kind of weird about it. And they were all super supportive, super kind. Like the first week when I pulled out my stuff, they said, oh, do you need privacy or anything for that? And I said, no, it's fine. I mean, I can just, you know, do it over here in the corner while you're doing, you know, your brain scan over there. And so, true story, like that's how it happened a lot of the weeks. So everybody was really supportive. Like we had conversations with it. And I tried not to like shove it down people's throats. Like I'm not as articulate as you guys in particular are. So it was there, and so like there were a couple of times I would share something like that Friday night reading during the sleep deprivation study. Like I read it, I laughed, they looked over, and I said, "I'm sorry, guys. Like I have to read this to you. Like I have to." So like I shared things like that when I thought it would be meaningful for them. And then in terms of a kind of daily ritual, it was more, I tried to be better because I'm not as good as I would like to be about remembering to pray in a given moment when I'm upset or frustrated. It's easy to let the negative emotions and then like in the aftermath remember to pray about it. So I got better at remembering to pray in the moment when I was upset, you know, to ask for guidance, ask for strength, all that sort of stuff. In the moment when I needed it. And then the nightly prayer routine was super helpful for me just to kind of help calm down before I went to bed, because it was sort of tricky. I'm used to reading in bed before I go to bed, maybe with a mug of tea perhaps. And you don't get to do that in the habitat. Your day, I didn't get into this, your day is scheduled down to 5-minute increments from the moment you wake up at 7 till the moment you go to bed at 11. And there are a bunch of surveys that you actually do in the evening right before you go to bed. So it's like, okay, 10:45, survey 1, survey 2, survey 3, go to bed at 11. And so it was an adjustment to figure out how to turn your brain off to go to bed. And so being able to do this at night, you know, really kind of helped calm me, get me into a good space to get a good night's sleep and to then carry me into the next day. So hopefully that answers a little bit.
So Sarah, Elizabeth, you are the only person in the history of the forum that has exceeded 2 bells. Which is terrific.
Great.
So in closing, in closing,
let us pray. The Lord be with you. God of the universe, God of creation, we give thanks for people in our lives that help to broaden our views and understanding and help to strengthen our connection to one another. Help us to continue to do the good work that we see modeled in our friend Sarah Elizabeth from this day forward. All this we pray through your Son. Amen.
Amen.
wonderful.
Thank you.
You know,